Welcome to the Inspiring Women Collection here at A Lovely Inspiration. This is a visual memoir series and is dedicated to honoring the voices and the contributions of remarkable women of color. And I'm your host, Layla, and I'm a writer and memoir consultant and a real-life muse who inspires women through the art of storytelling. And as a memoir consultant, I also partner with visionary women to preserve their legacies, both in the spoken and the written word. And so this series brings that memoir work that I do to life visually. So my intention here is to offer wisdom that will guide and inspire women who are navigating their own seasons of growth and transformation. And so today I am honored to introduce you to an incredible guest. So joining me is Michelle Wedderburn. She is a businesswoman and a community architect whose mastery of the art of transition has transformed lives across 2 continents. And Michelle has dedicated her life's work to something most of us take for granted, helping people navigate major life changes with dignity and purpose. That's what she does. And the reason why her influence has reached hundreds of lives is because her work is not just done through theory, but through actual boots on the ground service. And she creates sanctuary spaces where people find authentic support, they find real community, and they also find the ability to flourish in their new lives. In 2018, Michelle relocated to Mexico to a beautiful town called San Miguel de Allende, which is in the central highlands or the heart of Mexico. And she founded an upscale boutique guest house called Casa ELM. And this sanctuary space serves as a soft landing hub for travelers and future expats. And this isn't just ordinary accommodations. It's a place where people find relocation consultations that she offers. They get cultural immersion. She also provides community connections for people who are transitioning. And also just finally the clarity that they need as they begin to explore these new happenings, these new beginnings in their lives. More recently, she launched Hacienda ELM, which is a place that asks the question that too few entrepreneurs dare to ask. Not many entrepreneurs ask this question. How do we create spaces where people can age with independence, they can age with dignity, and they can age with joy, especially because elders aren't necessarily at the forefront of the conversation when we talk about entrepreneurship. And so Michelle answered this question, and her answer was a 60-plus living community that is built around what the elders truly deserve. She offers private suites, holistic support, and wellness programs that support growing a genuine community in aging. And what I deeply admire about Michelle is that she's not just running businesses. She is redefining what meaningful support looks like during people's most significant life transitions. So Michelle has always been such an inspiration to me personally. I have learned from watching her YouTube channel, Casa ELM, and also seeing firsthand how she intentionally builds a community that she has with care. She has become my personal mentor and also guides me in my own journey of creating sanctuary spaces for women. And so Michelle, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. I was just like, I don't think I need to say too much more after that. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. And, you know, the budding friendship and support of my business and, you know, that the inspiration that flows through me also flows to you and other people. And just being able to connect with someone who gets it and understands the work that goes into being a bit less selfless, right? And just really passing our purpose on, living in our purpose, but passing who we are onto other people in positive ways. So that was just amazing. Thank you so much for that intro. I appreciate you a lot.
Absolutely. You are my inspiration at this point. And as I always start this series, I like to begin the conversations by really anchoring us in where we are right now, which is the present moment, not the past, not the future, because I think it's especially important for women because we're often pulled in so many different directions, as we were talking about before we even got on, that we forget at times to really just sit in the present moment and honor the season that we're actually in. And as you know, as women, we move through different seasons. You start in the maiden, the mother, the crone. And each season brings its own gifts and its own lessons, and whatever it reveals to us is for us. And so, with that being said, let me ask you this. So, in this season of your life, what is one person, place, or thing that's truly inspiring you right now?
I would say in this season, and even in the past season, what has inspired me the most and pushes me the most is my son. Honestly, I think about where I am and who I've become through a lot of, let's call it life challenges, changes, maybe having expectations that didn't quite go the way you thought they would, or your life didn't quite pan out in this direction, but it went in this direction. I've become that person who truly believes we are who we are in our present moment, and that's where we're supposed to be. And if we need to be better, different in the future, the present is what you have to focus on to get to whatever those changes are, whatever that expansion is, whatever that recreation is. But you also have to be aware of yourself and the things that you need to do to get to that space. And so for me, for sure, my child has been my greatest inspiration to create not just a life that reflects the things that maybe I didn't get to do, but a life that I pray imposes in his soul experiences that help him become way greater than I am in terms of, and I say greater, I don't mean the things that I do, but just greater experiences than what I've experienced. And I've had an amazing life too. But when I think about my parents and my grandparents, we want to keep growing, especially as Black people. We want to keep expanding. We want to keep, being more, filling up spaces and all of those types of things. And I've always felt like this person, even when I was a child, that wanted to take up space. And I don't mean it in a way where it's like attention getting, just I want to take up room in places because I want to know and absorb a lot. I want to feel whatever it is that I'm experiencing in that moment inside of my being. I want to remember, this was what that concert felt like, or this was what that successful moment felt like. This was what it felt like graduating because my parents didn't go to college, and all those types of things. And so I pour so much into my kid because I want him to be greater than all the things that our ancestors experienced, that I've been able to do and create, but in the same moment, still walking in a very purposeful way. And so for me, he really is my inspiration. We have these conversations. I tell him a lot, the things that I'm doing right now and some of the things that are challenging for me in life, I push through and I do them because of you. I mean, honestly, it's not a guilt trip. I just want him to understand that I would be okay in maybe a more simpler space. I love traveling and I like to wander. I probably would be fine if I just kind of, had a simpler existence. But what I'm doing, I love. And I feel like I got to that because of him. I really wanted this life for him abroad. And it's not been easy, but it's been like, you know what? We're going to make this happen. And I've been able to become someone better than I was before.
That is amazing. Motherhood pushes. I talk to so many women, and especially if they're mothers, everything trumps that is it. Their kiddos, their kids, their babies. Yeah. That is the number one motivator that I hear. I just imagine if Michelle didn't have a child, what would she be doing at this present moment? Like you mentioned, like you'd be traveling the world doing other things. But I think it would be, especially in those hard times, difficult to even imagine like pushing through, because you don't necessarily know. Like, I know you have family support and everything, but it's a different type of love. A mother's love is different than any other type of love in existence. So I can absolutely understand and see how that kiddo is inspiring you. So that
absolutely, continuously. Yeah, thank you.
Because it's not easy. The path that we, especially the trail that you have blazed, like, you are the first to do a lot of things, and I think you're setting examples for him. Sometimes you're doing it and you don't even recognize it, and it's like, you look back at it and you're like, oh yeah, I did do that. Oh yeah, I did do that. And he's like, oh, my mom did do that, you know, for that to be passed down. And I'm not sure, like, ancestrally, like what your parents may have done or whatever it is, but it feels like you're just continuously blazing that trail. So I think that's amazing. You're setting the example, and he's also, it's like a even exchange. You're giving energy, he's giving you love and everything too. So yeah,
I feel like I've become a different person, but I'm more alive, a more go and get it. I mean, I've always felt that way, but I didn't maybe have the inspiration to do it. I've had motivation. I'm very creative, always have ideas. I have pursued, other things in the past. I consider myself a true serial entrepreneur. I've done and tried a lot of different things, but the stick and stay is the difference. And that part can be hard, especially for creatives, because it's like you create this idea, you put it out, it's beautiful, you did the lovely website and the logo and the launch and the pictures and all things, but it's like, okay, you know what, where do I put this and how do I do this? And that's the part that I feel where life can become very challenging, because when you have to go through the motions and you don't feel like it, yes, you need an inspiration to keep you going. And trust, if you are someone who's just like, man, I'm gonna do stick and die for my kids or my child, you're gonna figure it out, and I've learned a lot in those processes about just the big picture. I think we live too much in our head and we worry too much. And when I think back 14 years, 15 years, I'm like, you're fine. Like, you made it, you're making it, you're good, So reinventing is okay. Becoming someone else better than that past version of yourself is perfectly fine. It's not maybe easy, but you just have to make choices to keep putting that one foot in front of the other. Yeah.
Wonderful. Absolutely. I think, especially if you are in a position where you are like, I'm ready to give up, that one thing you're like, I can't give up because I have this responsibility. I owe it to this person. They didn't deserve anything except for my greatness or whatever I have to give to them. So
absolutely.
I could just imagine. So that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess it leads us to our next question, so that we can kind of go in and it sets the tone for us to explore deeper about you, because like I said, it's a visual memoir series, and in a memoir you give bits and pieces of yourself. You don't give like everything, of course. That would be like a biography, but we're here to like craft this story about your life and, your transition. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and how you actually became or came to be the woman that you are today, that I've already listed all of your accolades, which are, just a short list, but it's more to explore.
Absolutely. Well, I'll give snippets. My dad was a minister. My parents came from Jamaica, and my parents were living in complete different places. So this is I hope I remember to circle back to that discovery. But they migrated to Canada in the 60s, and that's where I was born, in Toronto. And at that time, it was just really easy for Jamaicans and maybe other people from other Caribbean islands or other countries to gain citizenship or at least residency in Canada over the U.S. So I have an aunt who is my mom's sister. She really sponsored a lot of her siblings to come to Canada in the 60s. And my dad also went to Canada in the 60s. And I thought my parents met in Jamaica, and I just discovered a year ago that they actually met in Canada at church. So I didn't know this because I did a kind of like an ancestral trip to Jamaica with my son last January 2025. And I was like, okay, I'm going to rent a car and I'm going to drive around the entire island, which I'd done before, but I did it a long time ago with someone else. And I thought it was important for me and Micah to have like this experience together because I want him to understand his roots. And I feel like that's something that I didn't get to experience. So long story short, my parents were in Toronto and then they migrated to Connecticut. My dad really got deep into being a minister and in church and all those types of things. And yeah, so growing up, that was kind of our life. We were in this Pentecostal setup and very religious and kind of, very strict, and still coming from like a very strong Jamaican background in general, meaning, the way we move in the world and how we see and view things and our attitude about, life and or directions or instructions is very, kind of rebel, a little bit rebel, kind of like, So I always kind of had this maybe more quiet, internal warrior person inside of me. I grew up with all boys, very tomboy and all the things. And so I always, even if I was obeying, I was probably disobeying in my brain because I was constantly questioning the system and constantly, kind of pushing back. And I can say that my father was just a very patient, loving man in general. He didn't let us get away with stuff, but he was also very patient when it came to, correction and discipline and things like that. He was kind of a person you could talk to and he would give advice and things because he experienced the opposite. So, one of the things that I always kind of say is even for anyone who's had a struggle of a life as a child, you can choose to be something other than your experience or your environment or what you had as a kid or a teenager. And I say my father was a good example of that, where, he didn't take out things that he experienced on his children. He was very patient and loving with us and things like that while my parents were together. So in saying that, we really grew up in this very Christian environment, which honestly, I just didn't like, and I'm just going to say it out loud. I just didn't like the type of religion and all the rules. I just didn't think it was a good balance, I guess, and I always kind of questioned it. But being underage, I had to kind of go with the flow and all the things. So I questioned a lot of things in that regard. I do believe in God and all the things, but fast forward to when I turned 18, I was like, I'm out of here. And, at that point, unfortunately, my parents had divorced. And I was just kind of like, I'm free. I remember I got a car and I thought I was just Miss Independent, and I dived into working. I started going to college initially, full-time, I believe. I remember if I started full-time, but then I decided, no, I started working. I got a job at an insurance company in Hartford, Connecticut, and I basically stayed there for 5 years, and I went to school at night, college at night, and they paid. So, I was only able to do a few classes per semester. So it took me a while, but I did go and get through all of that. So in saying that, I had a lot of indirection. I don't know if that's the correct way to say it, but I always had like this desire to own my own business, to have my own thing, you know. I was very proud. I think Jamaicans are very proud people. I was very proud, and I really don't know what I was proud of, but I was just a very proud person, you know. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm gonna, I remember I was very inspired to start like I don't know if you remember Jet Magazine, but something that was similar to Jet Magazine, but like a younger version of that. Like I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to be a journalist and all this stuff. And I went to the University of Georgia for a school year, and I realized I didn't like this. I don't like this either. And so, you know, I just kind of like took me a longer time, I think, to find my way, because I didn't feel like I had, you know, the right, like, people behind me to really help me figure out where I should go. I had the burning desire and the drive, but I just kind of thought, okay, and I know a lot of people probably think this, let's get the job. You know, let's work and let's get that 401k, which I had at a very young age. You know, I started working at Travelers, I think, I don't know if I was 18 or 19, but I was there for 5 years. And, you know, then just kind of, okay, I'm going to try school for 1 school year. And, you know, being older, I was kind of like, all right, I'm hanging out now with 18-year-olds and I'm like 23 or something like that. So it was just kind of like, you know, a lot of figuring it out and not having the right direction, because I feel that trickles down from, you know, the people who are in charge of you when you're underage, right? So not a blame, you know, because I always say that when parents often fail, it's because their parents failed too. And I say fail in the sense of maybe the things we wish we had or we had experienced or we got, and direction and all that. Sometimes they can't give you direction because they didn't have it either, and they're just in survival mode. So I feel like my life was kind of this, I saw better, you know, because of the work my mom did. I saw, like, you know, I'm going to say mostly Jewish people, you know, the beautiful homes, and, you know, like she talked a lot about like their kids and things like that. And I had this thing where I was like very like, oh, you know, why can't we do that? We can do that too, you know? So I think I've always kind of carried those memories, and it's formed and shaped me into really this person who wants to have a voice for people that have less, that are seen as being less, and all the things. And I feel that that's really what has pushed me to where I am now. It's like, no, I'm also entitled to have a life abroad and to live somewhere that looks, you know, beautiful and amazing, and to have the kind of ease and the care that I've seen in my, you know, that I saw in my childhood that wasn't necessarily afforded to me, but I saw other people experiencing this. And so I think all of those things kind of formed this mindset that I have of, you know, let's always be fair and balanced in those settings. And that's just kind of created like the type of person I am. I'm very rebellious, but also adventurous. I like to explore and do things. If you tell me I can't, I will. And, you know, so I'm kind of like that. That person, you know, I'm probably not cut out to be in a marriage, because I've tried that twice. And, you know, it's not like, it's not a thing where, what's the right word? Where I'm like, you know, contentious, like I'm not creating like problems. I'm not argumentative at all. I don't like that kind of energy. But I'm also not a person that likes to be controlled and told what to do either, in a way of it being, you know, like a gender thing, an expectation. I love balance. I love balance in life. I love balance in parenting. I love balance in exchanges with relationships and people. I love balance in community. I love balance in the little people feeling just as important as big people. And so for me, all of that plays into how I move in the world and what's really, either drives me to the right in a good way or to the left in not a great way. And so I think that just these experiences of, growing up, as I said, in a very religious environment where it was very controlled. And once I broke out of that, I was just like, oh, like never, I literally remember it being like, never again. Like no one's going to, force things down my throat that I don't believe. And I'm not going to just buy it just because. And I'm always going to have a voice. I'm always going to speak up. And I think a lot of that, of course, is just my DNA. My aunts are this way. On my mom's side of the family, very spicy. And, and it's spicy in a lady way. It's just interesting because, but then again, like I grew up with all boys. So there's like, this constant, like I can be, very sexy and blah, blah, blah. But I can also be very like, no, this is it. This is the way it needs to be. And it's helped me, I believe, in being in this space where I am now and having a business and being very calm and patient, which I feel like I've learned a lot of that from my father. But at the same time, having the voice when you need to have the voice, because sometimes we need to speak up as women because, sometimes we are instantly, looked at as, oh, they don't know what they're talking about because it's a woman. And oftentimes we, typically know what we're talking about. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. And when you were speaking, I was just thinking, like, I could see all of this now. Having the full picture, like, about your personality, the woman that you are today that we get to witness and experience. And I would just say you're very pioneering and you have a free spirit. When you were talking about, like, being in a position where anything that stifles your spirit cannot coexist in the same place with you. I can absolutely relate to that. And I can see how that pioneering energy from a young age, like you're like, okay, I don't like this religious denomination that we are in, but I still believe in God and I practice the things. But you wanted to blaze your own trail. Like, that's why I keep using that term, because that's what I think when I see you going into creating your own life in Mexico. Not only creating your own life, but having different pivots throughout that journey, and then also ultimately coming to the place where you've created a community of people that you have been an advocate for. You've emboldened them as well to be comforted when they come there, to feel confident in their decision to move there. Community is what you have built. So now my question then, I guess my follow-up question, since you have this free spirit and you're a strong thinker and you encourage me to put myself out there, put my business out there, don't listen to the naysayers or maybe an inner critic. So I take those lessons and I see Michelle continues to create new things and really follow her dreams and visions. So of course I can do that. And you do that in a sense, in a way of building community. So tell us a little bit about how you got to Mexico and how you were able, because when you first got to Mexico, you got there 2018, as you mentioned, and you didn't have a community or anything yet. You were just starting something. But how did you know, like, how did you become this community architect, as I call it, where you're having not only the Black SMA community, but just the community in general where people can come, because your space isn't just exclusively for Black people. It is everyone is welcome. So how do you create these spaces, not only for the expats or the people who are migrating over, but also for the older people as well? Like, you have different segments, different populations, you have different little pockets of community. That's why I call it an architect, because you put it all together like that. So how did you come to create your community space?
Well, I'm going to go deep on this, so bear with because as I'm listening to, I feel like there was a lot to the journey, and also a lot of things that were catalyst to where I am right now. So first off, again, back to my son, is I didn't want to raise him in the United States, and that was from when I was pregnant. I was a single mom, and I started a business as well during that time. And I remember really feeling like a cat in a box, trying to figure it out, didn't work out to have like the traditional setup with his father. And I was just like, okay, I need to create, and I need to create a life that allows me to not be bogged down in a 9-to-5 job, because I had quit my 9-to-5 job well before I had my child. So I had my child in 2012. I quit corporate America in 2002. And so, there's like all this time of me working. I had a job. I was working at one of Gloria Estefan's restaurants / nightclubs. So, I went to college. I did 10 or 12 or 15 years of corporate. And then I ended up, working in a restaurant and nightclub. And I can say that that was one of my favorite jobs. I worked there for about 5 or 6 years until I got pregnant. And I loved it. And what that place taught me was quality of life and quality of my time. And I didn't have to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, sometimes on the weekends in a corporate setting. I used to go to work on Friday. I would make a lot of money. I would work at like the basketball game. I just had fun. I had a fun job and I made a lot of money, and I had pretty much the whole week to myself to create and be an entrepreneur if I wanted to. And, I was very like kind of complacent at times, not the whole time, because I did pursue different ventures and things like that. But when I had my kid, it was kind of like, okay, clearly this job, that phase, that chapter is done. They wanted me to come back, and I was like, no, I'm going to focus on, I can't have a baby and then like be in this setting or whatever. I just didn't feel like that was something to continue doing. But it really taught me about the quality of life, and I loved the freedom that that job gave me. I mean, I remember when I turned 40, I took a whole month off and I went to Thailand and Cambodia, and I was able to come back. They just didn't care. They weren't like, and I'd never experienced that before. I always worked in this corporate thing where it's like, you got your 2 weeks of vacation, which was really only 10 days. And then if you want more, you got to pay for it, or you don't get paid. It was just too much. And, going to places and being around people that I just didn't want to be around, and spending so many years of my life, right? My air, the air I'm breathing in and out of my body in places that I don't want to be. And I realized that that's not what I'm going to do. So when I had my kid, I was still feeling very cat in the box, because I wanted to start a business. I didn't know what that business was going to be exactly. So it was very nerve-wracking and very roller coaster kind of in an emotional way. And then of course, you have a child, you still feel connected to the other parent and things like that. And, this is no knock to him, because we do have a very great co-parenting relationship. But in that moment, in that chapter, I remember it just felt very difficult. I felt alone emotionally. I had support, but I felt very alone emotionally. And I said, okay, I'm going to pour everything into my kid, right? I didn't go the opposite, because sometimes people get postpartum and it becomes the opposite of that. But for me, it was, okay, I'm going to prove to the world, we all right. And so I just really had this desire over direction that we're going to be okay. And, I remember I started working for this family, and I wanted to build like a lifestyle concierge business. And I didn't really, now if I think about it in retrospect, I really know what I was doing. I just knew that I didn't want to work for anyone. And so I remember I set up like a day of interviews at Starbucks. And, I had these people come, and I created like these little postcards that were my business cards of like, I would pass them around and, and I was just like, like, what does that even mean? And I was like, okay, people who have a lot of money, I'm going to help them make their life easier, their day. If you need a nanny, I'm going to source that for you. If you need someone to clean your house, I'm going to source that for you. And I remember I started working for, believe it or not, one of the co-owners of Patron Tequila, which everybody knows if you drink. Patron Tequila is big in Miami.
Wow.
Yeah, Ed Brown. And, he was married to this woman at the time who had 3 children with someone else. It's like, I'm like, y'all got drama too, right? And so I was only there for a very short while. And I realized, like, I definitely don't want to work for anyone. But while I was there, I remember saying, okay, this is me training myself on what do they need, right? Like, what does that look like? And learning about that kind of thing. It didn't last very long because, again, I'm just not cut out to work for people, period. So don't offer me a job because the answer is going to be heck to the no, right? And so I remember when I decided to move on, and I had my cards, and it was perfect. Like, everything happens in divine time. I had my cards and all the things, and, I was like, I wanted to buy like a house and flip it and be a realtor investor because I love, fixing places and houses. That was just like my thing. I was just like, I want to do this, da, da, da. And so I went to, at the time I was going to a different type of church. It was kind of like a non-denomination, but they used to have really cool Sunday services and meditation services. And this one service in particular, they handed everyone a little mustard seed, like physical handed us mustard seeds. And I got that mustard seed when I had this card and this concept to do this lifestyle concierge business. And I remember I brought my kid to daycare, and I went to the park with my dog, and I literally had the card in my hand. I was like, okay, here it is. Like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, I was holding it up to the sky, and I was just like, here's my mustard seed. I'm having faith. Like, that was the lesson. What do you want me to do with it? Right. And I'm walking and talking to the sky, and I'm walking with my dog. And I was like, here it is. Like, what's going on? And there was this is kind of going to be a long story, but there was this like house that had a for rent sign on it, and then the house next to it. And they were both clearly built by the same person. The one next to it was all abandoned, had like boarded up windows and stuff. And, it was in like parts of Florida is just like super ghetto, right? And so I was like, oh, maybe I could buy one of these older houses and fix it up and sell them, and then, just start making money this way. So I called the number on the house next to it that had for rent. And this woman calls me back, and I said, hi. I said, I'm just interested in the house next to yours, because I'm assuming they're maybe the same owners, same style, whatever. And I said, is it for sale, whatever? And so she was just like, no, it's not, but we have 183 other properties in our portfolio. And if you're looking to buy something, and I said, well, I'm kind of looking for a house that I could maybe flip or whatever. Don't know if, what these costs are going to be and whatever. And so we start chatting, and she's like, telling me whatever. And I was like, who has 183 houses? Like, what? So I'm listening to her, and then I'm literally like, oh, tell her about your business, right? And so I tell her about my business, and can I tell you the next day? She was like, go to this address and give me a quote to do this work. And I was like, okay. And this was after me talking to the sky, right? And so That's how my business in Florida started. Like literally from zero to $60,000 to $120,000 to yeah. And I was determined, and I was just like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I was capable of managing, flipping houses. So I didn't flip, but I was doing like turnovers. So as people moved out, I was the company that had like all the things under one umbrella. So property management companies didn't have to leave their office. They could just send me and my crew, and we would basically whatever. So this was like, here I went from wanting to, cater and help rich people to suddenly like I'm the turnover company, right? And I'm doing a great job, because they kept saying, oh, you're a woman, you're so organized, and you had all your stuff together. And then like my child is like 2, not even. And I am like staying up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, doing invoices and quotes and whatever, waking up at 6. And it was a very emotionally tough time, but still exhilarating at the same time. I used to imagine literally waking up in the morning and putting on black war paint under my eyes and just being like, you got this, sis. And I refuse, girl, and I'm that girl. And I refuse. I remember just being like, I refuse to cry. I refuse to have even one tear drop on my son's body, face, hair, anything, just like, we are going to be okay. And I remember my mom, she was so supportive all the time. She was like, you know, do you need money? And like every now and then, you know, she would send a little bit of money. But I remember once she sent me like a check for like $200, and I just tucked it away. I never cashed it. And I was just like, I don't need it, and I'm just going to put it over here. And I remember when she came to visit me, I gave it back to her, and I was like, we're good, you know. And the thing is, you know, we have this perception of being really low. I had money, you know, like I had a good savings. I had a 401k and stuff like that, but it was just this mindset. I was like, I don't want to touch that. I'm going to, you know, make it or whatever. And so I was able to kind of like come out of this. And, you know, and so fast forward a few years, wanting to leave Florida because I really didn't want to raise my child in Florida. I said, okay, I'm going to buy a house. I bought a house, you know, after kind of getting out of this whole not having the best credit. You know, I built everything up. I built my business. It's hard to get a mortgage on being a business owner, right? And I did that in 2 years. I was like, fixed all my stuff, and you know, and the challenges that I had were really because, you know, when I had my kid, I just had like, you know, like a good 6 months to a year of just like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to figure this all out. But then business started to make sense, and I was doing my thing, whatever, bought my house, which was a rental. It was an income property. It had 2 houses on the same lot, and, you know, it was like, cool. So I never actually moved from when I was living. I bought it, and I just started renting these 2 spaces to a long-term person and short-term in the back, which was just like a little cottage or whatever. And so all of that led to, okay, I know I want to move abroad. I want to live somewhere else, and maybe this will be the income that will help support that move abroad. And then I rekindled with someone that I dated in high school, right? So, you know, this whole kind of like suddenly seemed like some big like fantasy kind of romance again, and all the things. And, you know, he was financially in a good position, and I was running my business, and he was that guy who was like, oh, I'll pay for stuff, you know, I'll take care of whatever. And, you know, and I got this A, B, C, D, E, F, and all the things, you know. And so I think I just kind of felt like I can breathe a little bit, right? And now I can really start moving into making plans to be abroad a little more. And maybe there's more ease, because he was receiving his pension at the time, even though he's still working, but he was still getting a pension. So I was like, well, what if, you know, we move to Mexico? It's going to be less expensive. We can kind of break down some of the debt that he was carrying, and we can, like, you know, just reevaluate cost across the board and all the things. And, you know, like, my mindset is very can-do, fix it, help you, build you up, you know, kind of thing, especially if you're on my side and in my corner. You know, I do believe in, if you're in a relationship, that you work together to be better, to have more, to do more. And, you know, not just kind of like one-sided, right? And so it just kind of really came to me this way, where I was like, oh, you know, we can potentially move and have more ease and be semi-retired. But I always knew when I got to Mexico, once we decided on Mexico, I wanted to still do something in Mexico. And I thought at the time, all I could think of was women's retreat for single moms and or tired moms, because that's how I felt when I was doing it all on my own. I was like, I just need a break. I need 1 week off. I need 2 weeks to just be pampered and whatever. So those are my thoughts when I moved here. Was like, okay, we finally made the decision. We visited in 2017, and then 2018, 6 months later, so 7 months later, we decided, okay, let's go for it. Micah was just finishing kindergarten, and that's like summer of 2018. Let's just move, right? Let's go. I still had my house in Florida, so I was like, okay, income as planned or whatever. And so we were here. Me and Micah were here, and he didn't come right away, right? But he would just come like on the weekends. We were getting settled and all the things, and then I would start thinking like, okay, what can I do? What can I do in Mexico? Thought about the women's retreat, but the thing that I learned, and I tell people now, and the things that I share, is it does take a while to settle into a new country. It's not like moving to a new house. It takes a while. I feel like a good year is realistic. Across the board for you and your spouse, or you and your family members, all the things, there's so much to adapt to and adjust to and to figure out that, you can't know it until you go through it. And so I didn't really, even though I had traveled in and out of Mexico, and that's a whole other chapter previous, we'll get into that, I really realized that, this is much longer, a longer process than I expected. And it was just kind of, an emotional grind. And then, I had this very long distance relationship of this person coming from Connecticut, my ex, to Mexico. And it was like, every time, we would have like these longer weekends, it just felt like this ain't it. Like, it just didn't feel good. It wasn't, it just didn't have good energy to it. And I'm a good energy person, especially in my house, And I remember a lot of times feeling like, I can't wait for this person to leave. I can't wait for, it just felt very disruptive on a regular basis. However, being human beings and being, women, and also being in the position that I was at that time, I didn't have like a job and another thing. That was me working on, do I want to do retreats? Do I want to do maybe some special trips around Mexico, because I love Mexico? And I was still just kind of, sea legs. And I started, just kind of like exploring, like, what could that be? People talked about, digital nomad and all that. And I just didn't, it wasn't relatable. I remember someone saying to me, oh, you should do what you did in Florida. That's great. And I was like, no, it was a lot in Florida. I can only imagine what it will feel like here, because it would be a little bit more challenging, not knowing how to really deep communicate with people and workers and stuff. You really have to be able to communicate with the people doing work for you. And I was still kind of, I knew Spanish, but not enough to have that type of business. And so, long story short, COVID comes and, we're both locked down, and all of us are locked down in the house. And it's just, for many people, you realize like, oh, this ain't it, right? This relationship ain't it. For me, it's just not healthy. It's not good, and all the things. And again, I had that cat in the box feeling, right? And like, it was very ferocious, because now I'm sharing space with somebody, right? Before it was just me sharing space with my emotions, but now it's like me, person, emotions. And of course, I have like my child, who I'm like really feeling I need to be very protective of, because, that's not the biological father, and it's just not a healthy mix. And so COVID really for me was, you've got to figure out something else. And I had already started doing very kind of brief online consultations for people when they wanted to know how to move. And at the time, I was called Afro Expats, and I created my channel, Afro Expats, back then. And I created it not being exclusive to Black people, but I always said I wanted people in general to see life through my Black lens. And that's the reason why we were called Afro Expats. And it was just me showing, again, back to what I said before, why this life is for everyone. You just need a plan, and you need to work at it, and you need to create, stability to sustain a life here, and here's how it works. And so I started normalizing us not only living here in the mountains of Mexico, but normalizing us moving through Mexico, traveling by car. No one kidnapped me, no one accosted me on the side of the road, no one tried to rob me, and all the things that we see repeatedly. And it's so ingrained in our subconscious when we watch, Hollywood things, and scripts are all Mexican cartels and all that, and so I wanted to normalize that, and also normalize seeing people of color in these spaces. And so, yes, when I moved here, there were 20 or less Black folks, right? And now there's hundreds and hundreds of us here that live here. And so I started sharing my life through my channel, talking about my experiences, even with, non-Afro friends that I have. I have amazing non-Afro friends here. I have they were my original community, right? And they still are my community. So I'm very good friends with Caucasians. I'm very good friends with Mexicans. I'm very good friends with indigenous, people. And I say they are Mexicans too, but, they come from a more indigenous background and things like that. They all accepted us and they all welcomed us into the fold. And that's what I believe Mexico provides. And so all of those experiences really pushed me into the year 2021, the beginning, where I was just kind of like, okay, it's been a really tough year for everyone, the world. Many of people, in relationships that were just not healthy. It's like, okay, I really see that this isn't good for me, because now you're all in, you're under the same roof 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I remember just feeling, again, like I said, cat in the box. What am I going to do about it? And I've never been that person, as you probably gathered, that's just going to sit and deal. I'm not that person. I am not that girl. And so there were a lot of signs and a lot of things that really led me to, you know what, you've got to jump and you've got to take that leap. And that's why I said the catalyst type things in our life that lead us to certain, crossroads, we have to choose to go through or cross that road, right? We need to be okay with intuition, faith, and making change. Because if you stay where you are, 5 years from now, you're just going to complain about, I was just, and this happened. No, I am not that. I'm like, you know what? I will cut you out like a cancer, and I'm going to keep it moving. And if I have to start all over, I say this a lot, and I say it and I mean it to my core. I will blow this shit up and start over. And that's exactly what I did. And I remember following intuition 2021 and, just keep putting, one foot in front of the other while going through a lot of the emotional things, a lot of traumas and things like that in my personal life, and getting all the way down to October of that year, where I just had this thing on me for the longest time in that same week. And it just kept saying, go to this neighborhood and look for houses. Go there, just drive around. You have a car, go there. And I finally did it. I remember I got in my car, picked up my son, and I drove to this neighborhood for 2 hours, and I found Casa. And it was just a sign. I didn't have a realtor. I didn't have a plan. I just listened. I listened, and I believe. I just believe in that. I think too many times, especially as women, not just women, but mostly as women, we shut down that voice, that thing, that gut, that turning. You can't. You have to have faith. You have to believe that that thought and those emotions and those situations came to you because it's trying to show you this is where you need to pull that thorn out of your side, right? You got to pull that pain out of your side. If you're feeling and suffering in life, you got to change it. You got to take the initiative. If you are a free person, you have to change it. Okay, you can't be afraid of, the money. And, I'm not saying that that's nothing, but nothing's going to be better if you just sit there. That's it. I'm not a sitting duck. And so that's really what happened is I literally, and I'm very cocky about it, right? I'm very cocky about it. And I literally saw the house. I took the number down, and I was like, I want to show you. And so I remember I got home and I sent a message. And at the time, this person wasn't in the house. I sent a message to, the number, and I was like asking about the house and stuff. And they were like, it's such and such and such. We'll be there on Saturday if you want to see it. And I said, absolutely. And Saturday rolled around and me and Micah came. And I remember walking in just being like, wow, it's so beautiful. And just like, kind of trying to get my orientation of the space, like, where am I again and what floor and whatever. And then I remember I asked the person, like, can I take a video, because I wanted to like go home and, because it was a lot. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Right. And then I got home and I sat down. And I remember I shared it with a friend, and I said, I want to send you this video of this house I looked at today. And I remember, she really said some good words. She was like, Michelle, this is the next level of your business. You should go for it. And I was like, okay. And she's like, sit down and look at your company DNA, because she had done some coaching. I had paid her to do some coaching in a cohort that earlier that year. She's like, look at your company DNA, look at everything, and then go from there. And I sat up until 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was just like, yeah, this makes sense. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. And it was going back to women's retreats, the safe space, and all the things, and that's why I say, you ask for stuff, the universe is working for you. You just have to be mindful, and you have to keep remembering you have to put the work in. It's not just going to drop in your lap, if it does, good. But most people have to keep consistent and doing the things. And so I remember another good friend of mine was in town, and her father had just passed, and she just kind of reached out, and I didn't want to bombard her with like, oh, guess what? I think, I was just like kind of mulling it over. But this is all in the same, I think it was in the same weekend. And then she said, oh, tell the guy that I want to see it. I'll be back, so he's like, okay. So he drove all the way back from Guadalajara, which is like 4 or 5 hours away. And he came and he let us in. And she was like, no, Michelle, you got to sign on the dotted line. She's like, you got to sign that check. And, so it was just like these two voices and me, and of course my kid. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so I remember I went home and I just said, okay, I want the house. I want to do this. Right. And the guy was like, okay, cool. And it still took like so like I said, this is October. I didn't actually get the keys until December the 1st. And December 1st, I already had like some women who were coming here in January for a relocation kind of experience. I can't say it was a tour, but kind of like this experience that I had kind of collaborated with someone else on earlier in that summer of 2021. And now I was kind of like, wow, I can put them in my own house. I don't have to put them in someone else's guest house. I can put them in my guest house space. And I was just like, we have 7 weeks to populate the house with furniture, because there was nothing in the space, not even a curtain rod. It was like nothing. And I remember saying, I'll move furniture from my house if I have to get a couch and blah, 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 blah. And so I just started on this thing. And I remember, this is a bit ruthless because I can be. My ex came back from getting his COVID shots. And I'm sorry, I didn't believe in that. I never got it. And I was like, I said, oh, by the way, I got a house. And he's like, oh, we moving? I was like, absolutely not. I was like, that house is for my guests and my business. And if this doesn't work out, because I knew it wasn't going to, if this doesn't work out, it's going to be for me, my son, and the dog. That's it. Because my thoughts were, we'll live downstairs, and then the main part of the house will be for my guests, right? And then it was like, the back straightened up. Oh, well, I'll just pay for this. Whatever. Okay, no problem. And I just stayed focused on the energy in the space. I didn't want him here, you know, because a few times he was kind of around when I had the vendors and stuff, and it was just this is like a lot of chaos, you know. Some people thrive in this, and I just was like, okay, you can't be in this space because I don't want that in the house, because you leave behind these things. And so I really started, you know, creating like this kind of division of where you spend time in my life, because now I realize that this is my path and this is how I am going to be able to survive. And sometimes, I'm sorry, it sounds a little bit, you know, cutthroat. It was, but sometimes we have to be that way. And it's okay for women to make those decisions for their safety, because that was my situation, especially for my kid. I didn't want to have a kid that was traumatized by somebody who didn't really love them, and a lot of things, you know. And so all of those things were catalysts to Casa, and why Casa is really a safe space for women. And it's not from, you know, a violence standpoint, but it's an emotional trauma. It's a safe space where you can come and start the other chapter of your life, to feel comfortable, to feel healed, to feel calm, to connect with other people. Yes, my house has always been open to everyone, all demographics, men and women. I've had a lot of couples that have come here. I've had people who, you know, are from other communities that have come here, and I've loved on every single person. I treat them all the same, all equal. And yes, I have mostly Black women who come because I'm a Black woman, you know. And so that's what Casa has been, and also growing into helping people who want to move, giving them the right information, supporting them in that way, helping them navigate San Miguel and all the things. So that's the long, deep version of, you know, how I kind of progressed through these experiences into where I am and who I am today, and why I firmly believe in, you know, women having a voice and standing up for themselves and all that. I've always been that person. You know, I understand that not everyone has, I'm just going to call it the balls. I always have, and I've always been. I don't know if it's just, like I said, the way I grew up, who my ancestors are. I was always around boys, so I always felt like, you know, big and bad and whatever. I still feel that way, but it's like I feel that we have to speak, right? It doesn't mean be rude, no, not at all. But we have to speak. We have to have a voice, and we have to fight for the things that we believe are right. And, you know, that's in the world in general. We have to continue to do that. And that's, for me, what Casa ELM was founded on. It was like a choice to not be in something that wasn't good for me, and to have faith that something else is better for me. And I know it, and now I just got to step out there into the dark and figure it out. And that's exactly what I did. Yeah. A very long version.
No, I appreciate it, because that's what this is for. That's the intention. That's the goal. I love hearing origin stories. That's why I was just listening intently as you were speaking about how you got to the concept of Casa and everything. Just, if we were to go back to the very center point of where everything started, it really started from that mustard seed that you got that day.
Yep.
And then you just making your intentions. It sounds like most people are like, well, yeah, I need to go to school to know how to do this. But you're like, I don't need all that. I just need to have the faith and then figure out how to work it as I go. Like every business venture that you've had, as you mentioned, you're a serial entrepreneur, which I am as well. I see a lot of those similarities where I didn't have any sisters. I have all brothers as well. So I understand like the grit that comes with being a woman or a girl and living in an all male household.
Yeah, that masculine
it's a different
energy
where you're like, you can still balance it too, but you have more of like the perseverance and the drive that a lot of people don't necessarily have. You have the balls to do it. Like you said, the kahunas, like to really actually go out there This is my dream. You put that into the universe that day. You wanted to be a travel concierge and a concierge, excuse me. And imagine like getting to meet that woman that started this all for you. And you're like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to put together a crew, go in here. So the property management company, I love property management. That was one of my favorite jobs that I had. So, and then real estate in general, because real estate can really amplify your finances going from zero, like you mentioned, to all the way that elevated you to build your fund so that you could migrate to live out your dream, because your dream was no longer in America. You wanted to transition your son, and just listening to all of that, the origin story of how you got to Casa, and you transitioned from a relationship into really putting, I think the thing that stood out to me the most when you were talking is how every single emotional moment that would be considered maybe traumatic, you took that energy, instead of stewing in postpartum or any type of trauma or of a divorce, whatever it may be, you decided to channel that energy into that direction of, okay, I need to flip this script, basically.
Absolutely.
I cannot stew in this. This is not productive for me. I have a child. And even if you didn't have a child, I think this would still be you at your core and your essence, just listening to your Jamaican background. Like, I know, like, I love Jamaica. That is my thing. Like, I was engaged to on all of that. So I know the culture and the history and the strength of what you're taught as an individual, as a people, and how everything is a self-determination type of energy. So I can see that in every single milestone that you listed leading up to Casa, and then also how you created the community specifically for women, because it was something that you were in need of. So you figured, well, maybe let me try to make something I'm in need of, because I know this is a service that other people would want. It's a healing thing. And then I think the last thing that really took the cake for me was how you mentioned about your partner and being in that space and leaving energetic residue. And that was something that you were careful to curate, to be like, I don't want that in this new experience for me, my son, and my dog. You're not welcome here. Basically, in essence, that energy cannot coexist here. So
exactly,
you putting yourself first, you putting your child first, you putting your vision and your dream first. It's just, I can see now how everything clicks from childhood all the way to Casa. And so the next question I guess I have, now that you've created this thing in Casa, what made you say, okay, you've already created this first community of people, not only just women, Black women, but people in general of all races and all demographics. So what made you decide to say, okay, Casa ELM is beautiful, lovely, I love it, but I want to do more. I want to give of service more to transitioning to Hacienda ELM. Like, how did that come about?
Well, I would say that seeing the experiences that my dad went through, that was a big part of it. He's since passed, but when he was really like kind of deteriorating over time, he was very much into his church and preaching and all the things, and again, very proud. So I think he always kind of, even when he wasn't doing well, he kind of seemed like I'm going to prop myself up, or I'm going to sit at a table instead of standing in the pulpit. We're going to do it in the cafeteria, and we're going to still, I'm going to still preach the word and all the things. But really seeing his physical side deteriorating over kind of like a period of 1.5 to 2 years, where I could start seeing very noticeable changes. And he was in California. And also seeing his wife, who really did an amazing job of caretaking and really being like, kind of like protective of him and what medicines and things like that. And really just kind of being there, trying to, advocate for him. But they were in Cali, I was in Mexico. And then the other part of the experience that led me to this was in April 2024, I went to visit my mom And I've been there many of times. And my mom and dad were the same age, but my mom is a very health conscious person, very fit, always stayed active. So yeah, she could still run circles around even me. You know, she walks all the time. She's very conscious about what she eats and all the things. And, you know, although they were not together, my mom and dad still had a good, you know, healthy, again, relationship and all the things. But I said, look, you know, he's not taking really great care of himself. And I see my mom as somebody who did. But going to her senior building where she's lived for a very long time, she's always kind of the community person. She does like coffee once a week for the residents. They have like a little, you know, area, cafeteria downstairs. But she goes to her friends that live in the building, and she helps. Even this morning, I spoke to her. She's like, oh, I'm going to go to so-and-so and help her do her laundry. So she's always like doing, you know, like these active things. But me going in to say hello to, you know, various people who were in a wheelchair or much older. I think there's one of the ladies can't see very well. One of them can't hear very well. They're still in a very isolated scenario because they're in their apartments. Even though it's a senior building, if someone doesn't come and take you out of your apartment, you may just stay in there and just, you know, you're alone, right? And so I remember just kind of this sense of loneliness again for me, and thinking as I'm aging in a foreign country, you know, I don't have any family here at all. I have friends, but your friends aren't responsible for you. And so I started just kind of like thinking about that process. And when people move into assisted living facilities, because that's not what we are, but when they move into assisted living facilities, a lot of times that decision is not necessarily their decision. And a lot of times it's kind of an emergency, right? Or my health is bad, or I can't do this anymore by myself. A lot of people don't really think that much in advance because maybe we're living still in, not necessarily denial, but we're living in a bit of denial where we don't want to handle our business. And so seeing these different examples of aging, I remember when I came back from that trip, I said to the lady that works with me, I was like, Sandra, I was like, what do you think about, you know, getting a nice house somewhere where there's like, you know, mountains and it's out in nature, it's quiet, doesn't have to be in Central, it doesn't need to be directly in Central. What if it were outside and, you know, you could just have like this calm, you know, lifestyle, if someone's taking care of you and cooking for you. And I remember she was kind of like, you know, she had this very perplexed look on her face because in Mexico, culturally, you know, elderly stays with their families. The elderly people typically are with their families and things like that. And I said, well, you know, there's a lot of foreigners in San Miguel. And I said, even for myself, like, I don't intend on living or moving back to the U.S. So, you know, I have to also have these thoughts and think about these things. And I also don't expect, oh, Micah's going to do everything and handle. I don't know. You know, he might, he may. He's too young for me to know if he's going to be that guy. I don't know. I'm assuming he will be. But, you know, he, at the time when we were talking about it, he was not even 13 yet. And so my idea and my thoughts were, what if we created a space that was still community and, you know, we made ease for people that were aging and providing them a space where they can age in community and have ease, but still have like mental stimulation, activities, wellness, you know, good food to eat that's in alignment with your nutrition, and then someone who is actively aware of you and making sure you're okay, right? Doesn't mean you have to come out and interact with everyone. It just kind of, you know, you can if you want to, or, you know, like these things are for you, but you can also chill if you need solitude, or if you enjoy gardening or whatever. There's all of these options and things. And that's when I just really started talking about it out loud and saying the things out loud. And yeah, like 6-7 months later, here comes this place in my Facebook feed. And, I know Facebook is always listening, but again, another example of the faith aspect and talking about things and then going for it. Now, where it ends up, and how it all pans out, we don't really know. But I feel like if you have a vision or a dream about something, you have to pursue it, and you have to also be okay to, try that and to go for it. And I remember in that moment, just kind of like going to the property and being like, wow, this is really beautiful. And it's everything I said. I was like, it should be 5 or 6 rooms. It should be one level. So, older people don't have to climb up steps. And that's exactly what it is. It's outside of the city. It's quiet, it's nature, I should say. Because, there's like donkeys braying sometimes, and roosters, and they're not on the property, but they are around. And there's lots of birds, and just so when I saw it, I just thought, well, this is exactly what you've been saying off and on for the last few months, and decided to go for it, another leap of faith. And I just feel like maybe I'm talking about it now, realizing like, a lot of things have been that, and I mean, sometimes people may look at it as, well, that was not smart or that was foolish. I don't believe in that. I believe we learn from everything, and, we push through whatever we need to make things happen as we need them to. And that was really, for me, the birth of Hacienda. And, we're still, growing, and what and how it exactly looks in terms of like the concept, it's still a beautiful space. And, we tweak, as I told you before we started recording, like, I've been reaching out this week in particular to various groups and organizations to see how we can maybe work together to, bring just the right residents that we need in that space, that want to be there, that need to be there, that need this kind of support. And, we have a lot of inquiries all the time about it. And so it's very interesting, because I feel like I'm really at the beginning phases of learning something, just as I did with Casa, like what community looks like at that age. Yeah.
Yeah, your vision is just continuously expanding. I think that is just amazing to watch how I believe that all of your businesses recently, and that's why I think that they are flourishing, is because it's soul-centered. It's something that was birthed out of the necessity for something that you were yearning for. You saw the need for single moms, or moms in general who are burnt out, to have retreat. So you created a space starting with that concept, but it expanded beyond anything you could even imagine, I'm sure. And then on to something else that feeds your soul about aging, not only your parents and watching them go through the transition, but also thinking about, oh, well, we oftentimes forget, like, oh, we're going to be forever young. No, we're not. Like, everyone's aging. So what is the plan for the future? Some people just think, oh, the plan is 401k or retirement or IRA, whatever. And that's one part of the plan, yes. But what about your physical health, well-being, your access to community, not being lonely? Because that is like a really pandemic right now, an epidemic, I should say, because there are so many people who live in circumstances where they can't have community, they can't collaborate with other people, and they feel isolated. And imagine as we age, where you were talking about Sandra and how she was looking very confused because their culture is different than ours from the West. Well, they are in the West too, but in North America, I should say, further up north, we have a different set of rules when it comes to age. And it's almost like something that we are embarrassed or ashamed of. That's why we dye our hair. We do all these different things to push away the signs of aging, because I don't know if it makes us feel weak or makes us feel like we are not great anymore, whatever it is. That's why I love the concept that you're coming with now, because like I said, it's soul-centered. It came from your heart. And I think in those rough times, not only does your baby boy get that for you, but also remembering like, wow, this is something that I'm really still passionate about. So even when I get frustrated, I remember the big picture. The goal is, this is why I started this. This is why I need to continue to put in the energy and the effort, even though it gets frustrating, because trust me, I understand, like, living in a position where everything is on you financially, and a lot of times can be taxing if you don't have a support system that you really need. So I absolutely get it, but I feel like every day your vision, we just watch you as a casual observer. We watch you from the outside and we're just like, wow, she just continues to thrive. It looks effortless. And I know that you share with us the struggles that you go through. So I'm not saying like to minimize any of the hard labor, but it really does, because if a person is sitting stagnant and then they're watching you, they're like, oh my goodness, she's doing all these different things in spite of whatever obstacles she may have had. That's something that's truly inspiring, because not only did you start from that mustard seed, come to Casa, now you're thinking like, okay, this is something that I would possibly need for myself. So if it's something that I need, that's why I started earlier with, she's answering the question that a lot of entrepreneurs aren't thinking about. Sandra couldn't relate because she's like, what do you mean build a place when you get old? We're in family. We're in community. We're birthed in community. And so now just transitioning into a different lifestyle where you're providing that for people, which I feel like a lot of the clients or a lot of the residents might be people from the West who don't necessarily have that. Maybe they've migrated down there. So I feel like that will be, because that's a question, and especially in the move abroad space, that a lot of people aren't answering. They just tell you to move. But then when you move, like you said, you need a good year to get acclimated to start off with. A lot of things you have to change your perspective on. And then after you acclimate, you just figure out, okay, especially if you're older and you're transitioning, what am I going to do if something happens? And I think that's what a lot of people fear. That's why they stay stagnant in the positions that they're in. And that's what I love about how you build a community spaces, because you give people that confidence to know not only, okay, I'm transitioning, this is a soft landing, but now you're opening even up a new space that answers the question, because that's what entrepreneurs do. They find the gaps and they fill the gaps with their ideas. And I think Hacienda is going to be amazing. And
Thank you.
It will really take off. So I am so inspired by that. And so just taking all the things that you have learned along your process and along your journey, what would you say is the greatest lesson that you have learned with all of this? Because I know you've learned so many. You've already dropped gems throughout. But what's like that one main lesson that you would say that stuck with you throughout everything?
Oh, I would say for sure, just you have to believe first in you. You have to say, I'm not really a put myself first all the time. I really don't, but I do believe in me. I believe in my ideas. I believe in what I'm doing, especially if I feel however I feel about it. In that chapter, you know, those things can change over time. But I think I've always had this thing, and I do feel a lot of it comes again from my background, from, you know, a father who adored me as a girl, you know, child, like those, you know, daddy's girl or whatever. I feel like, you know, having had that kind of confidence and self-esteem from when I was a kid, you know, even though, yes, we grew up in a very Christian thing, but, you know, I always knew that my father just kind of like doted on me, adored me, my brothers and stuff. And, you know, I was always kind of like, not treated like a queen kind of thing, not at all, or princess, but just kind of like this, believe in yourself, you know, believing in who you are. If there were places or times in my life where it felt like I needed a boost, I could say my dad was the person who I would call. You know, there were many of times I would call him, and I still had I had a lot of rebellion in me when it came to right and wrong. It wasn't about like, oh, I'm just going to do the opposite of what you said. I was always kind of like, okay, I need to reason, right? That's something Jamaicans like to say. We like to reason through things. We want to reason with the person. We want to reason, and I would go to my dad and ask him a lot of times, like, okay, I'm struggling with this from an ethical standpoint, a moral standpoint, and here's where I am. And even if he knew I was right in something, he always gave me other perspective. And so I feel like that's what has really helped me be this more balanced, fair person. I feel that I'm very fair in my approach to things, but at the same time, I don't think I ever lacked self-confidence in anything or self-esteem. I'm just like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do this. I can do that. Sometimes I may question something, a decision, but as far as like that. So I think what I've learned over the years, because many of times I've had like female friends where I couldn't understand why they didn't feel the way I felt, and I just want to fight for them, I'm like, wait a minute, no, you can't let them get away with that. And I realized not everyone is going to feel that way or have those experiences. It took me a while, it took me till I was an adult to really understand and be like, Michelle, that's you, that's not them. And so one of the things, like I said, is just believing in who you are. Even if you're not sure, really listening to that thing that goes off inside of you and being okay with making mistakes, being okay with not being right, and being good about saying, I'm sorry if you are wrong, and, communicating about those things. I think that's really important to communicate, because as we were talking before we recorded, just sometimes we have like these feelings and, we keep, and I learned this at the mustard seed service is, well, not at that service, but at that church. I did a 12-week of prosperity. And one of the lessons was forgiving things and people, even if they don't know, because if you don't, we're the ones that are harming ourselves, right? Because we're holding on to things. And one of those lessons was, if you keep squeezing the cactus, you're hurting yourself, right? Let that cactus go. And I've never forgotten that either, and I've used it. And I remember I had a hard time because the service that particular class was about forgiveness. And I'm like, I'm not forgiving them. They wronged me, blah, 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 blah. And I remember I had to also talk to my dad about that. And I was just like, when I was going through my stuff. And he was just like, you got to move on and whatever. And then I remember just kind of like it finally hit me. I was like, of course, I'm hurting myself because I'm holding on to, these emotions. So just, again, being okay with who you are, the decisions you make, listen to that intuition. And if you make a mistake because you were emotional, that's okay, right? We're humans. We are going to misjudge and whatever. For me, it's really communication is so key, and following what I feel in terms of intuition, not necessarily just an emotional, like, I got my feelings hurt. No, it's kind of like, what? If you keep seeing a repetition of behavior, of things, of signs, okay, that's something for you to pay attention to. But if it's something that you care really deeply about, or a person you really care deeply about, or a situation you care deeply about, finding your words and being able to communicate them and not let, the emotional thing kind of stand in your way of that. So for me, it's just believing in what your decision is, how you are, how you move in the world, being aware in a way that if you need to be better, improve, acknowledging that and moving on and not hanging on to things.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so powerful. Michelle, believe in yourself, that self-confidence, and not only self-confidence where you're just, okay, I believe in myself, but stand on your business too. Whatever it is, if you need to let go and release something, forgive people, stand on that. If you need to work better on bettering yourself, believe in that and focus and put your energy towards that. So the harboring and festering in things for too long, it's like, no, let's release that. Let's stand up for ourselves, be advocates for ourselves. And that all of that is self-confidence. So I can appreciate that perspective of the lesson that took you, because I can see that, because Michelle was confident from a child, a baby, all the way up. I could just see that. I know it. And you continue to have that confidence. And I think you were talking about how you couldn't understand how other women didn't have that. I think the biggest thing that I noticed too, like the love that your father had for you, oftentimes that really is instrumental in fostering like that confidence in women. Because mothers, yeah, we can get confidence from that, but the way that we interact with the male energy, oftentimes that can make or break us. And a lot of our traumas can be centered around men and male masculine energy, I would say, whatever that may come with. So I think that really sounds like what could have put like the battery in your pack. Like, imagine if you didn't have that. And I know, like, looking back, possibly it's probably very emotional for you to think about the conversations you had with your dad, and how you're like, Dad, maybe I did this, and how they were proud of you or whatever.
Yeah. I'm happy that he saw at least Casa, you know.
Yeah.
So I was really grateful because, you know, he was concerned for me. I mean, you know, it was difficult at that kind of like those last few years, but he was concerned about me being here on my own and, you know, like, how are you going to make it? And like I said, for me, once I made the decision to get Casa, and again, I didn't say this before, but I got this on my own. So this wasn't something I did with, you know, my ex at all. And this was something, it was a decision I made, and I went with it. And I said the energy needed to be what it was. But I remember, you know, having that same thing where I didn't talk too much about what I was doing. I kind of kept a lot to myself because I felt that, and that's one thing I want to insert in terms of what can I pass on, is keeping a lot of things to yourself sometimes is necessary when you are still trying to ensure to you that this is okay, like this was a decision you needed to make, or you needed to go after this opportunity or this business or this change in your life. Because when you have the naysayers and you have the gray cloud, it's not good, okay? You need to be like, okay, I'm going to sleep on this. I'm going to move through these emotions that are maybe causing some doubt, hesitation, fear, anxiety, whatever. And tomorrow's another day. And at the toughest times of my life, I've done that. I've gone to sleep at night. I'm like, you're just tired right now. Not denying the emotions, but just kind of like, I feel it more because I'm exhausted. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to feel it probably less, and I'll have better perspective because I had time to sleep. Yes, and if your outlet is to talk to a counselor or a therapist, that wasn't my outlet. But if that is your outlet, then do that. A good friend or someone you need to. My father definitely was there for me in this regard. I didn't always talk to him because sometimes he would try to talk me out of whatever I was doing, and I was not having it. I was like, okay, not you right now. I love you, but I don't need that advice.
That's dads.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they're trying to make sure their daughters are okay. But once I made the decision and I was here in the space, you know, I remember sitting in the corner of the living room. I had no furniture, and I had a chair. I don't know where the chair came from, but it was a chair, and I sat down and I showed him and his wife the space on FaceTime. And, you know, being the religious people that they were, you know, they prayed about this. Like, we sat down and they prayed over the space. And I remember feeling so encouraged by this prayer of, you know, them believing in what I chose to do. And I was like, thank you, you know, like I needed that. I didn't need anything other than that. And it was just such a beautiful experience at that time. And I was like, thank you so much. And then when they came here, I remember he was so proud. I'm about to cry. He was so proud of the house and the people that were in the house. We had Thanksgiving dinner, and there were like 40 people here. And he was like, oh, wow, all these people are here because of, what you're doing and stuff. And he was like, just keep doing what you're doing. And it was like that moment that really was like solidifying my choices and intuition. And also, moving beyond being afraid and scared to change and get out of something that wasn't good for me, that wasn't good for my kid, that wasn't good for my psyche, that wasn't good for a lot of things. And that's the reason why I say you got to believe in yourself and you got to do what you got to do, So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know it's very emotional. It's okay. That's what this process is you're giving yourself to the world. You never know who needed to hear this message. It's also healing for ourselves as we go through this as well. So tears are welcome here.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I'm not at all embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to add, I know this has been going on forever.
It's fine.
Is out of that experience as well, I did get to do my women's retreat, which was Peace Not Pieces. And I remember that just kind of came to me through just some research, because I didn't intend to do a women's retreat right away. It was just, I chose to embrace and create a project that was a personal healing for myself at that time. And it was just like, okay, you've moved on and you need a reminder of, why you chose this path. And I remember just being like, I needed to get back to that quiet, peaceful living that I didn't have for quite a few years. And how I felt when I lived in Florida, like me and my kid. I'm like, yeah, everything is not easy, but every time we would go home, we would just chill, like with my baby, we watched some little kid thing, or we'd go out and I would take him to the park. We always did something cool, go to the museum, whatever, even when he was little. And so in saying that, when I decided to move on, I got Casa set up, people were coming, I was just feeling so blessed. And I, moved into a separate, I moved out of where we were living together, and I got a separate, this was before I moved to Casa, I live here now, but I got a separate place, and me and Micah and my dog, we were over there, and I created this whole Buddha garden outside. So every time I would walk in, I would see like all my Buddha plants and my Buddha, and that just represented peace for me. And like I said, I had I'll give you the short word. I had this empty picture frame for the longest time, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do with this? I was going to have like all these abstract statements and just kind of hand paint them on the thing. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to be the canvas for these abstract, not abstract, for these phrases, affirmations. And I hired a good friend of mine and also a makeup person to put all of those writings and sayings on my entire body. And I had pictures taken and I framed it, and I wanted it to be a reminder every day that I woke up. And one of the phrases was my retreat, and it says Peace Not Pieces on my arm, because for me, it was like that was more important to me to have that in my life. My dad was a very peaceful person, and I've adopted a lot of that, even though I can be fiery and things, but I know that my day-to-day needs to be that. And that's finally when I was able to do my women's retreats. And I was like, here it is, full circle. You have a space. Now you're actually bringing, this art therapy retreat for women once a year. And, the women that I work with that help me facilitate have been through things too, and they're counselors, and they're like very professional, and they're just so phenomenal and so amazing. And I'm like, if I had not been courageous enough to move out of these things and spaces, we wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have done the things that I've been able to do in these 5 years or more. And so I just feel extremely blessed and strengthened by all of those things, all of those experiences. And as I said, a catalyst to the next things, you have to be willing to move. You have to be willing to make that change and to listen to your intuition. Yeah.
Wow. It's just amazing. Now to find out the story from Piece, Not Pieces, that is really like, if I could put your life in a short stint, like a short quote or something, that's what you've done. You've taken your life. Remember how I was talking about, instead of letting it traumatize you, you put yourself in a position where you're not going to be in pieces. You're going to be whole, as one whole, as a piece.
Yeah.
And you're not going to allow life to destroy you. And even if something does happen that chips away your armor, it's okay, because you put yourself back together and be whole, because that is your central guiding light. So I can just see, like, imagine just the art therapy. And I really find value in art, especially like the therapeutic value, as opposed to, like, I do participate in talk therapy as well, but that's something I've recently been doing, like art therapy. And I didn't know, like, I could paint a little bit. I like watercolor. So all of the things that you talked about with the painting on your body and everything, and I've seen some of the photos, which are amazing, and the thing that you do with the women, that service is birthed from, again, your soul. It's something that comes from you. I think there's a difference when you create a business that is soul-centered, where it's just like a corporate type of thing. There's a veil. There's nothing emotional attached to it. Oftentimes, those things don't necessarily last as long as something that may be like soul-centered, because of the consistency. Like, there is the engine behind it, which is you and your intention that you put into the space. So,
right. It just means a lot more. It means a lot more, because it's you know, what you've been through, and it's relatable to people who've been through something similar or very close to your experience. And, you know, I mean, even when it's a difficult topic, sometimes just being vulnerable and sharing your experiences, you just never know who it's going to heal or help.
Yeah, not at all. You just never know. I've been, even just in the short time that I'm, you know, reinventing myself and what I'm doing, like, I've gotten like messages from people that have told me that, oh, you're an inspiration. I'm just like, I didn't know that, you know, I'm just starting out here. I'm thinking I'm bumping my head here and there, and then somebody else is looking at me completely differently.
Exactly.
So it helps me to realign my vision of myself. Like, I am doing something right. That confidence that you mentioned earlier, that has been a recurring theme in your life. And so it brings me to the question, like, you've done all of these things in your life. So what would you say you're most proud of about yourself or about your journey?
I would say being where I am in Mexico, making it happen. You know, it's been very interesting. I can say that, you know, of course, growing up Christian, you know, formulated, kind of created this person who, you know, wanted to push back in certain ways. And I'm not saying about God, but the rules. And, you know, when I think about my 20s, it was still me trying to find myself, you know, going to college and determined to get a good education and all the things. And, you know, my first marriage, which was really a good first marriage, I'm still friends with that person as well. You know, but I was younger, and it was a good life, you know, but it wasn't like a struggle, you know, in the sense of who's Michelle, right? I know what I enjoyed doing. I definitely was able to create beautiful spaces, you know, in the houses that we bought and built and things like that. And then, you know, like kind of, again, moving out of that and into kind of like that 5-year stint of being single, working in a job that wasn't corporate, did not resemble anything I ever thought I would do, but realizing like, I enjoy this. I'm enjoying the freedom of my time, like being able to choose more and not be in like this more corporate mindset. You know, was it a job that I was proud of? Not necessarily, but it was a job that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the people. I felt happy when I left that space. You know, I loved the music and I loved my coworkers. They were so funny, you know, mostly Cubans and Venezuelans, and it was just a lot of fun, you know, and I thought man, I've been doing all this other stuff or whatever. And so then when it was all said and done, you know, moving forward, I don't think that I ever felt pressed to shine, to press to walk in any purpose per se. I pursued different things because I was a creative, right? And again, until I had my kid, it was kind of like, what are you doing? You know, what are your ambitions and long term? You know, what else? Yes, you love traveling. I got to travel. But once I had him, I felt like, okay, now you're more grown up and you're going to be more buckled down. And, you know, it was kind of like sometimes we have to go through tough things to, you know, become a diamond, right? That diamond in the making, that polished, you know, version of yourself, or that better version of yourself. And just kind of like growing and maturing into somebody who wants more for, you know, not just my life, but really more for my kid to really be able to take away and say, well, my mom did these things and that she was awesome, you know, and she loved to travel and we did A, B, C, D, because you know, we hit the road on a regular basis. And now I feel like I have someone that I can do it with and, you know, hopefully leave a beautiful legacy, even if the legacy is not a big bank account. It's a memory bank that's full. And for me, that's like, you know, that's it. And so I feel like all of the things that have led to these points in these chapters in the last, I'm going to say 8 years since I've been in Mexico, for me is really what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of making it. I'm most proud of making it on my own. I am a true single mom doing it by herself, and shit is hard, but I am doing it, and I just keep pushing through. And you know, sometimes people say, "Oh, you look tired." Yep, the show's tired. I am tired, you know, but I won't settle for, you know, support in a relationship that doesn't work for me. It doesn't mean I don't want one. It just means if I'm going to invest the time, it has to make sense. And I've learned that. I've never settled in any relationship, but I won't settle now just because I'm tired. I'm just going to be like, okay, you know, get the rest and go back to whatever. And I continue to speak out loud the things that I want to have happen and manifest. And trust me when I tell you, it works. It works. Okay, like my trip to Japan, I started talking about that in August and September. There were the tickets, the chances and the money, and I was just like, okay, here we go, you know. And so that's what I'm most proud of, just continuing to believe in this process of life and moving into where we need to.
That is wonderful. It's amazing to just hear, like, you know, I think your journey to Mexico is really like, I don't know, my favorite book is The Alchemist, and it talks about like how he journeys through that. Like, I listen to that book on repeat in hard times because it helps me just to remember, like, he's looking for the treasure, but the treasure is really at home where he started.
Exactly.
Just how you just brought everything full circle. You created a new home for you, and I think it was so inspiring to watch, or at least something that I'm proud of watching you, is how you take care of your son in terms of giving him the things that he needs, being that role model. And then when he mentioned, I remember you did a live where he was talking about just something about Japan. It's like, I don't know if it's like the comic books or whatever his interests were. And then you talked about world schooling and how you do all of those things. And in my mind, I'm just thinking like, goodness, Michelle's like a superwoman. She does all of these things and just like amazing. And then to hear that when you posted that picture on Facebook of like the mountain, it made me cry a little bit because I was just like, she really gave her son the memory back, like you said, that he really, he would, I'm sure he'll never forget that ever.
Better
because
not.
he can look, he can look back and just be like, oh my God, my mom made my dream come true. Because Michael's really passionate about it, like on the screen talking about it.
Yeah.
So just watching that manifest in real time, I think that was just amazing. And just like how we started, where that's the one inspiration, I guess. The final question I have is just, I've seen so many people talk about how you and Casa ELM specifically have inspired them. Like I spoke with Jamie on the prior video that I did on this channel. And she was cool with everything else, even talking about her journey and everything. But when I got to asking her the question about how did you grieve from the process and the sisterhood, how did that help you to heal? She mentioned everybody else's name, but when she got to Michelle, it was just like the waterfall. And I could just see how your light impacted her. Your dream just, she's just one of the many people that you've impacted. And so that's just one story I could think of. And it's other stories that I've heard about how Casa ELM has impacted them. And you get to see that as well by people in the chat and everything, just in general. Like you've been in publications, all of these different things. People have recognized the work and the efforts that you've put in to creating this soul-centered vision. And so with that being said, if you could offer for a person who may not believe, who may not have that confidence, any final words of inspiration to a woman that's listening that could be life-changing for them, like what would be your final words, your legacy that you could leave for them?
I would say that's a great question. I think sometimes when we collectively have self-doubt and may not have like the confidence maybe we see in others, you sometimes need to leave where you are, even if it's for a few days. Test the waters, test your own self, right? You probably need to just be like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the movies by myself. I'm going to go to a restaurant by myself. You don't have to go to a bar or a nightclub. I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to treat myself to something, because sometimes we're so conditioned in our space and where we are. It's hard to come outside of that. I mean, even for me, I'm home a lot, and there are times where I just feel like, God, the burden of the work and the business and life and sometimes I get invited probably right at the right moment to go do something. For example, someone asked me a few days ago if I wanted to go to a clothes swap, and I was just like, I'm not ready to, I like those, and I've done two of them at Casa in the past few years, but I have never been to swap at someone else's house. And so I was invited, and I said, I don't know, because they invited me that day. It's really difficult to do in the day of. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'll let you know. I'll set an alarm. And I said, I don't know if I want to have time to bring stuff too. Like if I'm going to take stuff, I want to bring stuff. And so she was like, oh, so I won something. I said, I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't have enough time to go through my things. And then the response was, oh man. I just felt guilty in the moment. And anyway, the point of saying that was I ended up being the one picking everyone up. And it was so much fun. It was like, there were some teenage girls there. They were so cute. One of them I knew. They were like, hi, Michelle. And, it was like we're like in there, like, going through the stuff. And I remember thinking, like, you just need to get away and out of whatever, right? And so if you're someone who can't break the feelings you have or the mood you're in or the current situation, try something that is outside of your comfort zone. And, even if it's not something you love, like just, maybe you're just curious, go to a museum, just leave all of this over here and try something outside of your day to day and see how you feel, right? See if you have like something different or better that could happen for you, you know? And that's, I think, what's the key and what's important. I would say, you know, doing something that's outside of your comfort zone, I think can break break patterns, break our conditioning a little bit, just coming outside of, trying to get outside of a mood or a situation. It really does help to do something that takes you away from those feelings and those emotions in the moment. As I said too, when, I would go to sleep at night, I knew I was tired. I knew I was exhausted. And, I always had to kind of like bring myself, like, don't get frustrated with Micah or whatever. I would say these things. Oh, he's a kid. He doesn't know any better. Like, calm down. It's okay. Everything's good. Get rest, get some sleep. And like I said, I would envision the next day, I'm going to war with my situation, and not in a way where it's like, oh, it's so bad. No, but more so like, you know what? I have goals. I have things I want to accomplish. I have a way of life that I want to have, to create. And so I have to put this work in. You've been chilling for a while, right? And now you have a kid, and now you gotta, put this work in. And it doesn't mean, you go hard and all the things. But for me, when people talk about soft life, I'm like, I don't know what that means. To me, soft life is someone else is providing soft life for me. I don't know. I don't know what that means on my own. I really don't. I've had soft life, but it was when I was with other people. And so for me, it's like, okay, you know what? This is what it is. It's not hard. It's just, I have to work at it. And I'm okay with that because the rewards are grand, and everything that I choose to pursue and do later in life, I'm able to, kind of walk that path. And, those are my goals. Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, anyone listening, this woman went from Toronto to Mexico on the seed of a mustard, like a mustard seed, on the faith of a mustard seed. So it's possible. Whatever your dreams or your vision is, this is a woman who has accomplished her dreams and her visions and continues to unfold and learn new things that keeps her invigorated, excited about life. And, sometimes it's frustrating, but it's the pushing through it and learning how to navigate different things. So now you have a new skill set and you know how to handle situations better. Oftentimes, a lot of people don't have the tools necessary to problem solve. And I think that's a really major issue that I see in a lot of people. That's why a lot of people shy away from maybe businesses, because everything is a problem. Like, you make 10,000 decisions in the day, like from the moment you wake up to the very end. It's like, and when I used to get frustrated when you mentioned like going to sleep and thinking about it, that's the one thing I used to tell myself when I hit like a position of rock bottom in my life. I'm like, I just need to go lay down. And that's it.
Get some sleep.
Sleep. I remember telling myself that, like, it's time to go lay down. Like, that was my command, like, exit phase left. It is time to just, it's something rejuvenating and really refreshing about sleep and rest. And I love that now in our communities, there are people who are coming out and even building businesses just based on a concept of rest, because we've been so burnt out by our jobs, by our careers, or whatever it is. So we're seeking refuge by moving to Mexico and other places in other countries, or maybe if you stay in the U.S., figuring out a way, if you can't move, to have some form of safety or solitude within yourself.
Absolutely.
That is just an amazing journey from, like I said, Toronto to Mexico. And now you are here just helping other people to also live out their best dreams. So, Michelle, this conversation has been enlightening. I learned so much about you today, much more, and a lot of the things we have in common as well. And I just know that people listening to this will definitely take away something of encouragement, of upliftment, and the wisdom of your story now lives on through this channel or through this video. And before we wrap up and we close everything out, you talked about all of the things that you do. And now, if someone was interested in participating or basking in that ambiance that is you, Michelle Wedderburn, whether it's Casa or Hacienda, could you let them know the website, the service,
Sure.
the programs, or whatever it is that could help them specifically as well, the pieces, the retreat that you have coming up?
Absolutely. So Casa ELM is my boutique guest house. If you've stayed on and listened to this whole story, we help people who are interested in having a soft landing experience in San Miguel de Allende, which is in central Mexico. We are really heavy into relocation tours. We have half week and I believe 1 full week during the year, but half week tours are available throughout the year. You can find everything at my website at casaelm.com. And on the events page, there's like a list of everything happening in chronological order. We also have our Peace Not Pieces retreat for women. It's an art therapy retreat. It's amazing. I have 2 women who are counselors and they use art therapy in their normal practice. And they're just absolutely phenomenal women. They've been in their work and their careers for over 20 years each. Kate Van Doren is an amazing psychotherapist, but in addition to that, an artist, an actual artist. She's doing this beautiful exhibit for International Women's Day in March, and I'm in it. And that's going to be in Querétaro in a whole museum, so I'm so excited about that. She takes these super beautiful photos of women and then she paints them and they're just so detailed it looks like the real thing. So that's something that's coming up. And then we have Gabrielle, who is also phenomenal, and I've worked with her. We did the documentary last year together, and she has Casa Corazon, and she works with women as well through art therapy, and she has workshops and things. So she will be here for my Peace Not Pieces. And then we also have immersion, Spanish immersion in the summer. We have a relocation that's geared specifically towards families where we have a little bit of a different program. So you can find everything at casaelm.com. And you can also follow me at the same name on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, all the things. And Hacienda as well. HaciendaELM.com has what we offer there, our program. It has pictures of our suites and of the property. And also you can book a one-on-one consultation, virtual consultation, or if you are in San Miguel, you can book an in-person if you'd like a tour of the facility as well. But there it will tell you what we do for the co-living at 60 plus, and just kind of the concept behind it, and what types of activities, what kind of food, what services are included, and things like that. You can find everything at both of those websites. And be sure to also subscribe to our weekly, we have daily newsletters for Hacienda, and then we have like multi times during the week for Casa ELM. So each of those websites will allow you to subscribe so you can kind of be in the know about what's happening. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Thank you.
It's everything that we mentioned today, or she mentioned, will be in the description box as well, so that you can get connected to it. What are the dates again for the retreat for the Peace?
It's in May. I don't know off the top. Yeah. If you go to the website, I don't remember if it's the middle. And if you are in San Miguel, already living in San Miguel, or you want to, get your own accommodation, you can buy a week pass as well. We do have 1 week passes available, but if you want like the whole kit and caboodle, you want to stay here, which really gives a more immersive experience, you can, put your deposit down, and you can pay, over time between now and then, I think up until 30 days prior to the actual event. So I am going to have some upcoming free webinars to talk about my events throughout the year, so stay tuned for that.
Perfect. So subscribe, do all the things. You see, she's curated the space. There are different events, whatever your needs are, relocation, whether you need 60 plus community, whether you need retreats, tours, all of it. She has it listed at her website, CasaELM.com and Hacienda ELM, ELM.com.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Michelle,
Thank
for
you.
honoring your story through this platform and allowing me to be able to put this out there to the world and have it as your memory that you can save as a keepsake as well for your journey and your process. I really appreciate everything that we mentioned, just learning about your life's journey to where the point you are now, and then seeing what's to come in the future as, you know, we progress as in this friendship and mentorship. I am just so very, very, very excited about the process. And so thank you so much again for joining me. And yeah, to my lovely community, if this conversation has touched your heart like it did mine, please do all the things. Click the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so that you never miss these powerful discussions. Also, subscribe to Casa ELM and Hacienda ELM. That's the name of her channel as well, so that you can stay in the loop about her journey and see if those services would be relevant for you as well. And also, please share this message with a woman who may need to hear this today. If you're looking to continue these kinds of conversations, I invite you to join the lovely community, which is our free sanctuary space where women of color gather just for inspiration, sisterhood, and support, because it's necessary, especially in these times. And we were talking about isolation and loneliness, and this would be a great community to join. It's free, so that you can connect with other women in that way. So the link will be in the description box as well. And so let us know in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway from Michelle's story? Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, remember that you are and will always be a lovely inspiration.
Thank you so much.
Bye.